the electric start. That way if you have a dead battery, you can still start it. It really comes in handy. Conversely, if you have a machine that is only rope start with no electric start, eventually that rope's going to break on you. And it'll suck this cord right into the recoil and you'll be dead in the water. If you have an electric start, you're going to put a lot less wear on that rope, virtually none, so you won't have a rope break on you and make you have all kinds of downtime, particularly if you're in a situation where, you know, you've been dropped off with the machine and you got to do a job and you don't have any tools. Oh, well, there you'll sit until help arrives. So whenever possible on a small engine, rig her up so you have both capability of electric and rope start. Now, speaking of remote locations, your own property can be a remote location. What I mean by that is sometimes you can be further away from the nearest outlet than your longest set of extension cords reaches. A battery jumper isn't very much good for you in that case. Sure, you take your car, go jump it, but what if you're in a situation where you're in a backyard with a gate around it, and you just can't, or any other situation where you just can't get a car near your lawnmower to start it. I got this back when I was selling cars. This is what dealerships use to start new cars when they're sitting in a lot for months on end. They don't get driven very much. They have parasitic drain. There's a lot of electronic components that are running all the time, regardless if the key is turned off and out of the ignition. So new cars, when they just sit there, are going to end up having a dead battery. Row after row after row of cars, all crammed in next to each other. There just isn't room to get another car in to jump start them. It's not practical. They can wheel a unit like this in between the cars and get to the one right in the center and jump start it with moving the fewest amount of other cars possible to get a car off the lot. And that can be important if you want to have it demonstrated to a customer. So you don't want to have it a big fiasco getting a car going. So it is a real handy thing in the dealerships, and it's just as handy around home for the reasons I've explained. The great thing about this, like I say, you don't need to plug it in. It's got juice. As you can see right here, this unit isn't plugged in. So I'm going to show you how to make one of these in an upcoming video. You can buy these. A company called Quick Start. They also have a rental thing. Dealerships, they lease them. It's called a Volkswagen, but they're very expensive. These Quick Starts are pretty reasonably priced. They still make them, and they don't look any different than this one either. And I bought this one back in 1987. One thing I did add to it is I added a continuous duty solenoid, so I can turn on and off these leads, the positive lead. That way, when I'm hooked up to the battery, I don't have to worry about a spark in my face. See, we turn it off, and it's dead. You turn it on. I put an indicator light on it too, but then they're hot. Basically, all this is the cheapest battery charger you can find, a set of jumper cables, and a car battery. That's really all there is to it. So if you're the least bit handy, you can make one yourself. But I'll show you how to make one probably a few months from now, but it'll be a fun project. So I'll put this fuel filter on. I'm not going to show you how to do it. I'm sure you all know how. One pointer though. You see these godforsaken things here? Some people might call them clamps, these miserable sons of bitches. I don't expect you to remove these and replace them just for the sake of doing it. But when you do a job like replacing a fuel filter, get rid of these awful sons of bitches and replace them with a decent worm drive hose clamp. And if you, all right, this is what a real hose clamp looks like, sports fans. Not this, not this. This is a hose clamp, not a piece of flat steel, not a piece of wire. You'll see them on new cars too all the time. It's like all the engineers got together and they must have some kind of hard-on against the hose clamp manufacturers, because they'll come up with any design of hose clamp that is not the same as what you would buy at a hardware store. The hardware stores, the auto parts stores got a lock on this, okay? They got the good hose clamps. Everybody else sucks. When you see these OEM hose clamps, take them and throw them sons of bitches away and put on one of these. And when you put on one of these, one other pointer. Yeah, they got a screwdriver slot on them. Okay? But they also have a hex end on them. Use a nut driver or a socket on a handled extension. You use a screwdriver on one of them sons of bitches while you're holding that hose and that screwdriver slips off. You're going to be one sorry son of a bitch. It will cut the hell out of your hand because you're putting a lot of pressure on it trying to turn that screw and hold everything in alignment. When that screwdriver slips off, it's bleeding time. All right, I didn't take my own advice here because I was getting low in my stash and I didn't want to run out of hose clamps when I need them, which brings me to my next pointer. When you go buy these in a situation where don't just buy two. Don't be so damn cheap. Get a bunch of them. You'll need them. If I would have used these two though right now, I guarantee sure as shit there'd be some situation where I need some hose clamps, so I just like to have some on hand. Don't tempt the breakdown guy. One other thing on a machine like this where it's convenient to do, this lawnmower, a garden tractor, now this is really hillbilly, okay? But if it makes a difference between you going and not going, yeah, hey, be a hillbilly. What you can do here, you might want to wipe this off with a rag first, and you just bend over and act like you're kissing it. You put your mouth on that and you blow in and pressurize that tank. It will send the fuel through the fuel line right up to the carb bowl. Now, you don't ever want to accidentally breathe in. So instead of releasing the pressure on your breath when you feel like you've pressurized the fuel system, just take your head away. Don't breathe in or you will huff a bunch of gasoline fumes, and well, that's not fun. So I will proceed with kissing the tank here and we'll see if the sucker starts. Can you believe it? I forgot to press the record button again. Okay, so try number one on pressurizing fuel tank by blowing in. It failed because I had the fuel shut off, because I had this fuel filter off. Turned on the line this time, pressurized it by blowing in the tank. That absolutely works, as evidenced by the fuel in the fuel filter and the leaking. And this is testament to my tip here that these spring clamp hose clamps suck. So I'm going to get rid of them and put on some real clamps so we don't leak fuel all over, and go from there. All right, I finally followed my own advice and I put on some decent hose clamps. What I really ought to do with these is just throw them across the shed here, get them lost in the gravel and never see them again, but I think I'll put them in my assortment of hose clamps. Maybe I can use them in case of emergency when I don't have one. However, when you go to make a list of things you need, as soon as you think of it, write it down, otherwise you'll forget it. So I got hose clamps down, and when you go and buy them, if you need two, don't just buy two, especially if you have several different types of equipment. Buy like 4 or 6, you know, that way when something goes wrong at home, you don't have to run to the store to get it. I mean, I'm not saying don't go buy expensive stuff, but on cheap ass shit like this, what are they, what, $1? Buy a few extra. Now, the great ether debate. A lot of people, oh, I never use starting fluid, whatever. You know, I've been using it for years. I've only had something bad happen one time. I was rebuilding carburetors on a snowmobile, and I put them together wrong, and they were basically stuck on wide open. I sprayed some of this in that machine when it wouldn't start, pulled the cord, and before I knew what happened, that machine went right through the garage door. So, I guess the moral of the story is use your head. So, we're going to use it on this machine here because it hasn't started in a long time. It makes it start easier, in my opinion, to put more wear and tear on a machine and cranking it with not developing any oil pressure than you ever will by what some people claim is the dryness of starting fluid. So I'm going to spray a little bit in here while I'm cranking this and get this thing going. Now I sprayed some starting fluid in there and it basically started immediately. So I'm saving on swearing the
cylinder lubricant, so maybe that takes care of that problem right there. All I can say is, I've never, aside from the cylinder